All right, so let's talk about this one. I was very pleased to see this. I've been trying to find vulnerability scanners that work well for Android devices, and this one is the best one I've found, MobSF. So you need a Linux virtual machine, and I think I've already got it installed on mine. If not, it won't take long. So here's my machine. I got a Debian 12 on ARM here. That's fine. And now I'm going to do IPA. See my IP address, and then I'm going to connect with the terminal so I can cut and paste, because I just prefer using headless servers. I've gotten used to them. And so SSH Debian at 192.168.121.129, and it didn't make it, so either I made a mistake or the IP address has changed. 192.168.121.139. That's why. Hard to read that little font. There we go. All right, so I don't need this console anymore. I'm going to minimize that. Okay, and now I've got the same situation as if I was using a cloud server. There, I can control the machine from here. Now, let me shove my instructions over to the side so I can see them both at the same time. All right, so I want to install Docker. Now, I think I've already got Docker running. Let's see. I think I can tell there, sudo system control is active Docker. That'll tell me if I've already got Docker on the machine. It's inactive, all right. Then maybe I have to install some of this stuff. Now on one of these, I actually installed Docker on my Mac. So let me see if I've done that. I think I put Docker right on the Mac. Yeah, Docker app. This is another way. You don't even need a virtual machine. You just install Docker right on your real host. And I think this is the boss way. So I tell you, you just have Docker installs. It even has a GUI and stuff. So now my Mac is showing it. So now what I can do, I'm going to just get rid of that Linux machine. I'm not going to use it. Let me go here and exit. All right. And I'm going to close VMware. And I'm just going to use my Mac to run it. So let me try that same command to see if my Mac is ready. My Docker is active. I think it should be active because I can see it right there running in the GUI. All right, I'm going to assume it's active. Now, since I'm going to install Docker, so I can pull this. By the way, Docker is the way you install Linux apps these days, because as you probably found out is doing these projects, when you install Linux apps, you very often don't have the right library or the right Python setup, and it's very frustrating. So you just get a whole container that has all the app and all its dependencies in one place, like a virtual machine. So I can pull it from the Docker repository. I'm getting Mobile Security Framework, latest version. And that'll pull it. And there you go. This is what it looks like when you download a Docker image. You have something like 10 or 12 pieces, and each one of them downloads. And if your network is fast, it doesn't take too long. So I'll let it go. I did run this a few weeks ago during CCDC, so I thought it would already be on my machine, but maybe there's a new version. I'm a little clumsy at Docker, this is all I know. Now the point is, while this is downloading all this junk, I'll talk about the next step. You run a Docker image, it's just like a virtual machine. The difference is it's much smaller and much faster than a virtual machine because it doesn't bother duplicating files that are also present on the host. And so this is going to run it interactively, and it's going to expose port, I'm not sure about interactive, but it's going to expose port 8000. Port 8000 in the Docker container is going to map to port 8000 on the host. That's all I want. And that's going to run the latest version of the Mobile Security Framework, and I'll be able to connect to it. It'll start listening on port 8000. Down here, I'm starting listening on HTTP 008,000. So then you can access it just through a web page. So we'll see. It's
You run the Docker app manager?
I probably could. I could probably be doing this.
The one that you're running is the Docker app?
Yes, when you run the Docker app, it opens this, and then I think you could probably do all this stuff in the GUI here, but you can also do it from the command line.
You actually create a Docker then.
You what?
You actually create a Docker then, when you run the Docker app.
Well, you have to download it and run it, and then it provides the framework like VMware does to run virtual machines.
So you basically create like a Docker inside there, so you can pull all the.
Well, well, you just install this app, which is generic, and then when you do a pull, it just downloads a copy of it so it's available to you locally, but it's not running yet. You run it with.
Is the Docker app only for Mac?
No, it's for every operating system, even the PC. That's why this is great for everybody to use. It's like VMware. It's more modern than VMware though, because it's much smaller. A server that can run maybe 10 virtual machines can run like 100 Docker containers. They're much faster, much lighter, and they're being used everywhere. They're also less secure. There are more Docker escapes than there are VM escapes. But anyway, this is why you should all get used to using Docker. It's real important these days. People use it all the time. Let me check for comments in the Twitch. Podman is an alternative to Docker. Wow, I never heard of that. Neat. Okay, Docker is very new, but I guess they got another alternative. That's interesting. Okay. Anyway, I only learned a couple weeks ago I could run Docker directly on my Mac so easily, and I'm loving it. This is, however, taking longer than I wanted it to. I thought I'd be able to run it. I've already run it recently on this machine a couple weeks ago, but somehow I failed. Oh, most of the downloads are complete. Good. Okay. Good. So it won't take too much longer. All right. I'll just wait for it. It's about to speed up. Yeah, these
So
two.
the Docker is
Yeah.
from the VM machine there.
Yes, Docker is not VMware. The difference is VMware emulates hardware, and then you have to install an entire operating system on it. So if you have a Windows machine and you run a Windows virtual machine, it has a second whole copy of Windows in there. So you have a complete duplication of all the system files, which is crazy. In Docker, it uses something called overlay FS. And what it does is for every file, it looks to see if that file already exists on the host. And if it does not make another copy. It just links to the existing copy of the file. So if you run a Linux virtual machine on a Linux Docker container on a Linux host, its size is almost zero. It's nothing more than just a folder with links pointing to the other files. Now, as you install apps in the Docker container, it gets bigger if you haven't also installed them on the host. But the point is it does run separately with its own networking and such, and you can make copies of the Docker container and you can distribute it. So it's like a virtual machine in those ways, but it runs much faster and is much smaller than VMware. Although, I've never done this, but it seems to me that if you were to run a Linux container on a Windows host, it would have to be as big as a virtual machine because none of those files are already going to be on the Windows host. So in that case, you'd get almost no benefit from Docker compared to VMware. But it does exist for Windows, and you could, in principle, do all this stuff directly on a Windows machine. I'd be interested to see what happens if students try doing that. I've not tried it. I've only run it on Linux.
When you want to install anything, any apps in
Yeah.
Docker, you have to install everything there.
Yes, the Docker apps tend to be like the minimal headless servers. They have nothing extra. So you can install things on them, but they're usually as small as possible. And you would have to install anything you want to put on there. But what people do is they write scripts that will download it and automatically install things, and then you can just deploy them with scripts, which is what people do. Then you have a lot of Docker containers, and you make like a server cluster out of it. This is what's happening in Kubernetes. This is what almost all web services are, like everything on Amazon, is a series of Docker containers managed by Kubernetes, which is the supervising software that will spin up more and more copies of it as needed to match the load. And that is so efficient, it's the modern way to do almost every server-side process. That's why it's real good for us all to learn this and get good at it. This is what everybody's using. And I'm interested to hear about Podman. That's interesting. So this is good. It's nearly done. Download complete. Okay. All right, let me get back to my instructions, which are here. So when it's done with that, this is the one that's going to run my container, which is like launching a virtual machine. Right now I've downloaded it, but it's not running right now. So I'll wait for this to, oh, this one's nearly done, okay. And I don't really know the difference between a pull and a download. Other people that are wiser than me in the ways of Docker may understand the difference. I've used Docker a little bit, but I don't really understand all the subtleties. Oh, okay, so it has to download, then it has to extract, and I guess that's what it calls a pull. Okay, so it's downloading compressed data. Okay, well, that's good, now I know that. All right, so now it's done. Okay, so the reason it did all that is because there was a newer image than the one I used a couple weeks ago. All right, so I'm going to run the Open Security and expose port 80, and it needs my password because it has to run as administrator, which is one reason why it is considered not very safe compared to VMware. You always have to run Docker on 64-bit hardware and as administrator. So there it goes. It's loading all the pieces, and it's got some API key. There we are. Now it's listening on port 8000. So I can just go to 127.0.0.1.8000. And there it is. Now I can analyze Android apps. All you do is drag and drop them here, and it will analyze them just like VirusTotal, but it's running on your own machine. It's not going up to the web. Now there is some web version of this running, but you can run it locally, which is much better. That way you're not exposed. If this was your app, you would not want to expose it to some arbitrary web service that you might not be able to trust.
But you're running static analysis, right?
Yes, you can also run dynamic analysis with this tool, but today that doesn't work as well as it should. The static analysis part is the better part. This tool can supposedly do both, but when I tried it, it's not very good at it. So let's get genie.apk, which I think I've got in my downloads folder. This is one you've used before in these classes. All right, I'll just make a new folder and go to downloads. All right, and look for Genie. There it is. Okay, this is an app we've used before that I found vulnerable on the web a few years ago. So I go to this page, and I just drag and drop the APK there. And there it goes. Now it'll take a little while to analyze it, and while it's doing that, you'll see messages go by here. You can see what it's doing. It's decompiling the APK into Java with JADX, just what you would do. Then it's going to scan the Java for vulnerabilities, which it's done, and now it's going to start analyzing the Java source. You can see how long it takes. It's done with that. Now it's going to do static analysis and look at the API. I'm not quite sure what that is. Then look at the permissions. Just try all these various vulnerabilities, and now it's done. And when it's done, you see it has 196 activities, which are visible pages, which is kind of insane. But anyway, receivers and providers, and there's the certificate, and so on. So let me see what I recommended looking here. It shows you the typical pretty vuln scanner thing. So look at the manifest analysis, and you'll find some vulnerabilities in the manifest analysis sections. Let's see. Here's permissions. There's a dangerous permission it doesn't like, viewing your location. Here's the API, browsable activities, network security, certificate analysis, manifest analysis. There you go. App can be installed on a vulnerable unpatched Android version. And you see it's rating them. So red is bad, yellow is not so bad. Here's another red one. It's vulnerable to something called Strandhog 2, a really old exploit. So this is the kind of stuff you find from Vuln Scanner. And as you can see, pretty easy to set up and pretty powerful. In network security, you can analyze the Anti-Fraud Center. I mentioned this before. I talked about this before. You can analyze the Chinese government network security app, and it will take quite a bit longer. And you'll find another flag here to get to. And then you can look at for another abused permissions here. There's a list of the type of bad things that people are going to do. It has certain permissions. This is what that article I pointed out a few weeks ago did. It didn't like the permissions this app had. It said these apps are permissions that are typically abused by malware, and it's probably not a good sign that this police app has them. And by the way, there was an earlier project where you were looking in this app I made, where you were looking for a registration code that was kind of hard to find in command line Linux, but you can totally find it easily with this scanner, because this scanner does find strings. You can see that here, permissions, someplace, here's, I think it might be at all the strings. Here's the file analysis. Here's all the files in the app. And it also has just a list of all the strings. There's abused permissions, domain, check to see if it goes to known malicious domains. And someplace down here, it has all the strings. See this scroll bar is only a little bit down. There, these are the strings. Most of this is all the strings in the app just right there. So you can, if you read the strings, you can search them with Control F in your browser. This is just a really nice tool, in my opinion. It makes it very easy to do a lot. And you can also download the Java code up here too. So it's really nice.
What other file can this thing analyze?
Well, it only analyzes APKs, I think. But it does show you all the files that are inside the APK, and you can download them all. And we'll do that in a later project.
So only for mobile phone, only for Android?
Only for Android. I don't think, it's a good question. I think they said it might be able to do iOS. That's actually a good question. Let me find out. Let's
I'm more interested in can it analyze the whole Android operating system?
Oh, no, I don't think so. It only does apps. MomSF analyze iOS apps. It says it can do iOS and Windows Mobile even, so I guess you can do iOS apps, which would be pretty interesting. As far as analyzing the operating,
Get the iOS app out?
you can do that. You have to have a jailbroken phone, and then you can get a copy of the app. Because each app is encrypted, but it's decrypted on your
The
phone.
problem is getting the jailbreak on the phone.
Well, you just have to get a phone. There's a jailbreak that was developed by one of my ex-students recently.
Those are old phones.
It doesn't have to be very old anymore. It only has to be about 3 years old. There's a recent jailbreak called Checkmate that works on all phones up to the one about 3 years ago. You'd have to get a phone about that old. Or you have to pay for an expensive phone. You can get it from Apple, a developer phone, or you can get emulators, jailbroken devices that are expensive from third-party companies. But the most reasonable solution is just get an iPhone that's 3 years old or older and jailbreak it. And then when you put an app on it, you can dump the app from memory. It's a very good thing, and I used to do it in this class, but it's too hard to get the phones out to people.
Is there any tool to scan the Android operating system? Because there are a lot of old phones that are not supported, and there are new Android operating system out.
Yes, this is a good question, to scan the operating system on your phone for known vulnerabilities, and I'm not a...
Not for known vulnerabilities, more like to check whether there are anything bad inside.
Oh, for malware.
Yeah,
Yes,
inside those
Yeah.
new Android operating system that you get from the internet.
Well, yes, if you want to check for malware, you can just put any malware on it. There's all kinds of, there's Blue Box.
You want to check whether somebody put something bad in those the new operating systems that you get from the internet. That you're not.
Oh, well, as far as I know, VirusTotal is about the only thing. There's also malware scanners on the phone. You can put on things like McAfee and Norton and
No,
Blue Box.
The old phone, they're thinking of upgrading to the latest Android operating systems, but then there's new Vector Trust.
Yes.
System that you get from the internet.
Yeah, the custom ROMs, I guess you can go to VirusTotal and send a link to the custom ROM and see what the report is.
Send the whole operating system up?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's too big. I'm not sure the answer. It's a good question. How do you know if there's malware in the custom ROM? I don't have a good answer. That's an interesting question. See if anybody has any more ideas. Podman uses a daemon, unlike Docker, so theoretically more secure. All right. So anyway, I'm going to stop the recording of this. That's what I wanted to show you about that one.